The neon lights of Corvey's cantina flickered against the perpetual twilight of Kepler 4 for 2b, casting eerie shadows across the grimy walls. The air hung thick with the acrid smell of burning spice and cheap alcohol, mixed with the metallic temps of recycled atmosphere that never quite felt fresh. In the far corner, away from the main crowd, sat a figure that most patrons instinctively avoided. Zefter had been nursing the same drink for 3 hours, his massive frame hunched over the small table like a mountain of scarred chitin and metal. What remained of his natural exoskeleton bore the telltale marks of plasma burns, kinetic impacts, and chemical warfare, each scar a story of survival that few would believe. His left arm, right leg, and half his torso had been replaced with military-grade cybernetics that hummed softly with each movement, their polished surfaces a stark contrast to his battle-worn carapace. The old warrior's compound eyes stared into the amber liquid before him, seeing not the cantina's dim interior but battlefields light years away. The phantom pain in his missing limbs flared up again, a cruel reminder of wounds that would never truly heal. He reached for his drink with his remaining natural hand, noting how it trembled slightly, a weakness he despised but could no longer control. The cantina's atmosphere shifted suddenly as the main doors burst open with a pneumatic hiss. A squad of young Vorthok soldiers strutted in, their armor gleaming with fresh polish and parade ground perfection. Their carapaces bore no scars, their movements carried the cocky confidence of warriors who had never faced real combat. They were the new generation bred for war but baptized only in simulation chambers and training grounds. By the Great Hive, the tallest recruit declared, his voice carrying across the cantina with obnoxious volume. Did you see the deployment? Orders finally, some real action against those soft-skinned mammals. His companions clicked their mandibles in agreement, the sound sharp and aggressive. Humans. Another spat, the word dripping with contempt. Command says they're barely out of their home system. Primitive projectile weapons, no energy shields, fragile biology. This will be easier than crushing larvae. The group's leader, distinguished by fresh lieutenant markings on his shoulder plates, puffed up his thorax with pride. My tactical instructor says human soldiers break after the first bombardment. Something about their weak psychological conditioning will have them surrendering before the second wave even lands. Their laughter echoed through the cantina like the chittering of excited insects. Other patrons, a mix of traders, miners, and off-duty mercenaries, gave them annoyed looks but said nothing. Everyone knew better than to antagonize fresh recruits high on their own importance. It was then that one of the young soldiers noticed the solitary figure in the corner. Look at that old-timer, he whispered, though his voice still carried clearly. Probably hasn't seen action since the Centauri campaigns. Bet he's impressed by real warriors for once. The lieutenant's eyes fixed on Zefter's cybernetic implants with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Veteran, he called out, his tone dripping with false respect. You look like you've seen some combat. What do you think about us young bucks finally getting our chance to show these humans what Vorthok's superiority looks like? Zefter's grip tightened on his glass, the reinforced material creaking under the pressure of his cybernetic fingers. For a long moment, he remained silent, his sensors automatically cataloging the recruits' positions, weapons, and probable threat levels, old habits that would never die. Come on, grandfather, another recruit taunted. Don't be shy. Tell us about the good old days when wars were fought with honor and enemies knew their place. The group approached his table with the swagger of youth, their boots clanking against the metal floor. They arranged themselves around him in a loose semicircle, blocking his escape routes. Another tactical error that spoke of their inexperience. Zefter slowly raised his head, and for the first time, the recruits got a clear look at his face. His left compound eye had been replaced with a sensor array that glowed with a cold blue light. Acid scars ran down his jawline like melted wax, and a breathing apparatus covered where his natural spiracles had once been. But it was his remaining natural eye that made them unconsciously step back. It held the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen horrors beyond imagination. Have I faced humans? Zefter's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The cantina seemed to grow quieter around them, as if the very air was holding its breath. Once, at a place called Hadrian's Edge, the lieutenant leaned forward eagerly. And how quickly did they surrender? How many did you kill before they broke? Zefter's mandibles clicked once, a sound like breaking bone. I commanded the 47th Assault Battalion, 850 of the finest Vorthok warriors ever bred for war. We had conquered 17 systems, broken siege lines that had held for decades, and never once retreated from battle. The recruits exchanged glances. their excitement building. This was exactly the kind of war story they wanted to hear. When we left Hadrian's Edge, Zefter continued, his voice growing even quieter, I was the only one who came back, the only one still breathing, the only one who wasn't scattered across that cursed planet in pieces too small to identify. The smiles faded from the young soldiers' faces. The lieutenant's confident posture wavered slightly. That's impossible. Command said human resistance was minimal. Their casualty projections showed command projections. Zefter interrupted, and for the first time, his voice carried the sharp edge of controlled rage. Are written by insects who have never smelled human blood or watched their squad brothers die screaming in languages they didn't know existed. His remaining natural hand began to shake visibly, and he gripped the table edge to steady it. The cybernetic components in his body whirred softly as automatic systems compensated for his rising stress levels. You want to know about humans? His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You want to hear about the species that turned an entire planetary assault into a grave marker for Vorthok arrogance? The recruits found themselves leaning forward despite their growing unease. Drawn by the gravitational pull of authentic horror, Zefter's cybernetic eye focused on each of them in turn, recording their faces with mechanical precision. Sit down, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had given orders when death was the alternative to obedience. And prepare to learn why I haven't slept through a single night in 3 years without waking up in screaming terror. The young warriors sat, their earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. Around them, the cantina had fallen silent, other patrons sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Even the ambient noise seemed muted, as if the very station was holding its breath. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, indifferent to the small drama playing out in one forgotten corner of the galaxy. But for the young soldiers about to hear the truth about humanity, those stars would never look the same again. Zefter's cybernetic eye dimmed as he accessed memory files he'd tried desperately to delete. The recruits watched in fascination, as data streams flickered across his optical display, casting blue light on his scarred features. 3 cycles ago, I was Major Zefter of the 47th Assault Battalion, he began, his voice taking on the mechanical precision of a military briefing. High Command summoned all battalion leaders to the war room aboard the flagship Devourer of Worlds. The chamber was massive, carved from a single asteroid and decorated with the skulls of conquered species. Very impressive. Very intimidating. He paused to drain his glass, the liquid burning down his artificial throat components. Admiral Krextel himself delivered the briefing. You younglings wouldn't know him, died of shame after Hadrian's Edge. Anyway, he stood before the tactical display, his carapace gleaming with victory medals from a dozen campaigns. Gentlemen, he said, we have discovered a new species that requires education in Vorthok superiority. The young soldiers shifted in their seats, hanging on every word. One of them, barely old enough to molt, whispered, what did the humans look like in the intelligence files? Zefter's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Pathetic pink, soft-skinned bipeds with no natural weapons, no claws, no armor plating, no poison sacs. They walked upright on 2 legs like newborn larvae learning to stand. Their average lifespan was maybe 60 rotations, barely enough time to gain combat experience. His cybernetic fingers began that rhythmic drumming again, metal on metal creating an ominous beat. The intelligence report was thorough. Humans had only achieved interstellar flight 2 of their generations ago. Their ships moved slowly through space, relying on chemical propulsion and primitive fusion drives. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles, literally throwing pieces of metal at targets. Can you imagine? Metal slugs against plasma shields and energy weapons. One recruit scoffed. How did they even survive their own home world? That, Zefter said quietly, was the first question we should have asked, but we didn't. We were too busy calculating profit margins and occupation schedules. He gestured with his remaining natural arm, and the movement sent phantom pain shooting through his missing limbs. Admiral Krextel showed us orbital scans of their outer colony, Hadrian's Edge. Beautiful world, really. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in patterns that spoke of gentle weather. The cities spread across the landscape, like bioluminescent fungus, connected by transportation networks that looked almost organic in their design. The recruits leaned closer as Zefter's voice took on an almost hypnotic quality. The planet housed maybe 12 million humans, farmers, engineers, terraforming specialists, families with young offspring, no military installations visible from orbit, no defense satellites, no particle beam arrays, no quantum mines scattered through the outer system. Their orbital traffic consisted of cargo haulers and passenger transports vessels, so lightly armored they couldn't withstand a focused flashlight beam. He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Command classified it as a Level 3 pacification mission. Standard protocol: orbital bombardment to eliminate infrastructure, ground assault to secure strategic points, occupation forces to maintain order. Total estimated duration 3 rotations. Casualties: minimal, resistance negligible. Zefter's cybernetic eye flickered as he accessed more memory files. They assigned us 847 ships for the operation. 47 assault cruisers, each carrying a full battalion of Vorthok warriors, 200 fighter escorts, 300 support vessels loaded with occupation equipment, administrative staff, and celebration supplies. Yes, celebration supplies. Command was so confident they'd planned the victory feast before we even left port. The young lieutenant who'd first approached him asked, "What was your ship like, Major?" The Razor's Edge, an Apex-class assault cruiser. 2 kilometers of death and destruction wrapped in quantum-forged armor plating. My battalion consisted of 850 elite warriors, each one a veteran of at least 5 campaigns. We'd conquered the crystal cities of Vega Prime, broken the siege lines of the Horsehead Nebula, and personally served the extinction notice to the hive minds of Proxima Centauri. His voice carried pride that quickly curdled into bitterness. When the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at Hadrian's Edge, the humans didn't even try to run. Their few patrol ships actually approached us with standard diplomatic protocols. They wanted to negotiate. Can you believe it? 12 million soft-skinned mammals facing nearly 1 million Vorthok warriors. And they thought they could talk their way out of conquest. One of the recruits interrupted. What did Admiral Krextol tell them? Nothing. He vaporized their lead ship mid-transmission as an example to the others. The remaining human vessels retreated to planetary orbit, broadcasting surrender terms and offering to discuss resource allocation. They were still trying to be civilized even as our targeting systems locked onto their cities. Zefter's remaining hand began to shake again, and he gripped the table edge until his knuckles showed white beneath his natural chitin. The orbital bombardment began exactly at dawn, planetary time. I watched from the bridge as our plasma cannons reached down like fingers of angry gods. The first targets were obvious: spaceports, communication centers, power generation facilities, transportation hubs. We followed standard doctrine: eliminate the enemy's ability to coordinate, communicate, or move resources. His voice became mechanical, reciting facts to avoid emotional investment. Phase 1 bombardment lasted 6 hours. We reduced 17 major cities to glowing craters, severed every communications link we could detect, and turned their orbital infrastructure into expanding clouds of superheated debris. Our sensors showed no return fire, no energy signatures. That indicated resistance. The humans appeared to be hiding in underground shelters, probably hoping we'd be satisfied with symbolic destruction. The recruits exchanged confident glances, recognizing the pattern of Vorthok conquest they'd studied in tactical school. Phase 2 began at noon. Precision strikes against suspected government facilities, military training grounds, and industrial complexes. We were methodical, efficient, professional. Every target eliminated according to schedule, every objective achieved within acceptable parameters. By evening, Hadrian's Edge looked exactly like every other world we'd conquered: broken, burning, and ready for occupation. Zefter paused, his cybernetic systems running diagnostics as stress levels spiked. That night, I stood in the Razor's Edge observation deck, watching the fires spread across the planet's surface. My second-in-command, Lieutenant Colonel Vex, joined me with the final casualty reports. 0 Vorthok losses. Estimated human casualties: 7 million dead, 5 million wounded or displaced. He congratulated me on another flawless operation. The old warrior's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. 12 hours later, when our dropships descended through the smoke-filled atmosphere, we expected to find shell-shocked survivors crawling from their hiding places, ready to accept Vorthok authority in exchange for basic food and medical supplies. That's how it always worked. That's how it was supposed to work. His cybernetic eye focused on each recruit in turn, recording their eager faces. Instead, we found something that still defies tactical analysis. The cities were empty, not destroyed empty, evacuated empty. Streets clear of bodies, buildings intact but abandoned, personal belongings left behind as if their owners had simply vanished mid-activity. No signs of panic, no evidence of hasty retreat, just Absence. The cantina had grown completely silent around them, other patrons unconsciously leaning in to hear the veteran's words. And there was something else, something that made our natural instincts scream warnings our rational minds couldn't understand. The air itself felt wrong, not poisoned or contaminated, but charged with potential energy. Like the moment before lightning strikes, when every nerve-ending tingles with approaching danger. Zefter's remaining hand finally stopped shaking, as he reached the crucial point. We had conquered an empty world, and somewhere in those silent cities, 12 million humans were waiting for us to make our first mistake. Zefter's cybernetic systems whirred as he accessed the most painful memory files in his neural storage. The blue glow from his artificial eye cast dancing shadows across his scarred face as data streams of that terrible second day began to play. Dawn broke over Hadrian's edge like a crimson wound across the sky. He began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. The smoke from our bombardment still hung in the air, turning the sunrise into something beautiful and terrible. I remember thinking it was a good omen. Red skies meant victory in Vorthok tradition. He paused to steady his breathing apparatus, the mechanical wheeze filling the silence. My battalion had established forward operating base Alpha in what used to be the human central administrative district. 12 city blocks of reinforced concrete and steel, perfect for defensive positions. We'd set up sensor nets, automated turrets, force field generators, everything by the manual, standard occupation protocol for hostile environments. The recruits hung on his every word, their earlier confidence now replaced by growing unease. Corporal Vexmar was our best point scout, 37 successful campaigns, veteran of the Siege of Kepler-Ninti, decorated for valor at the Battle of Wolf 359. His natural senses were so sharp, he could smell an enemy's fear from half a kilometer away. If anyone could detect hidden humans, it was him. Zefter's remaining hand traced patterns on the table surface, unconsciously drawing tactical diagrams from muscle memory. That morning, I assigned Vexmar to sweep grid section 7A, commercial district filled with shops, restaurants, and small offices. Standard urban clearance operation. He'd done it hundreds of times before on dozens of worlds. His job was simple. Verify buildings were empty, check for booby traps, mark safe zones for the occupation forces. The old warrior's voice took on the precise cadence of military reporting, as if reciting facts could somehow make them less horrible. At 0800 hours, Vexmar reported entering the target zone. His comm signal was strong, his biometric readings normal. At 0815, he confirmed visual contact with Building Complex 7 Alpha, a 3-story structure that had housed some kind of human educational facility. Children's artwork still decorated the walls, he said. Colorful pictures of alien worlds and spaceships. He thought it was amusing. One of the young soldiers shifted uncomfortably. What happened next, Major? At 0823 hours, Vexmar's comm signal went silent. Not damaged, not jammed, silent. His biometric monitor showed he was still alive, still moving, but he wasn't responding. Tehale's protocol dictated immediate backup response, so I dispatched second squad to investigate. Zefter's cybernetic fingers began that ominous drumming again, the sound like a countdown to disaster. They found Building Complex 7 Alpha exactly as Vexmar had described it. Children's artwork, empty classrooms, abandoned learning materials scattered on the floor, but no Vexmar. His energy signature had simply vanished, as if he'd been off the planet. Second squad spent 2 hours conducting detailed sweeps with full sensor arrays. Nothing. The cantina had grown so quiet that the hum of life support systems seemed loud. Other patrons had unconsciously moved closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of authentic horror. Then, at 1100 hours, a runner from 3rd Platoon came sprinting into base camp, his carapace clicking with terror. He'd found Vexmar in Central Plaza, the main ceremonial square where humans had once held their civic gatherings. Zefter's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward. They had arranged his body with artistic precision, every piece placed deliberately to create letters visible from our observation posts. Welcome to Hadrian's Edge spelled out in perfect Vorthok military script. Not just the language, the exact font style used in our tactical manuals, complete with proper grammatical markers and ceremonial flourishes. The young lieutenant's mandibles clicked nervously. How could primitive humans know our military writing systems? That was the question that should have terrified us immediately, Zefter replied. But we were still thinking like conquerors instead of prey. We assumed they'd captured some of our equipment, maybe translated our databases. We didn't understand yet that they had been studying us for much longer than we'd been studying them. His cybernetic eye flickered as deeper memory files activated. The real horror wasn't just the message, it was the precision. Forensic analysis showed that Dexmar had been taken apart with surgical instruments, not weapons. Every cut was clean, purposeful, designed to preserve tissue integrity while maximizing psychological impact. They had turned his death into art. One of the recruits made a disgusted clicking sound. Barbaric mammals. No, Zefta corrected sharply. Intelligent mammals. The kind of intelligence that studies its enemies, learns their weaknesses, and turns their own strengths against them. We were still calling them barbaric when they were demonstrating tactical sophistication that rivaled our best military academies. He gestured toward the viewport where distant stars gleamed like cold eyes. After finding Nexmar, I ordered full defensive protocols, triple patrols, overlapping sensor coverage, constant communication checks. We weren't taking any chances with whatever had killed our scout. But the humans had already shown us something crucial. They could move through our sensor nets like ghosts, strike without warning, and disappear without leaving traces. The old warrior's breathing apparatus wheezed as stress levels spiked. Attacks began that afternoon. Not frontal assaults or obvious ambushes, something far more insidious. Soldiers would report strange sounds from empty buildings. Motion detectors would trigger, but sweep teams found nothing. Equipment would malfunction in subtle ways that suggested tampering, but technical analysis showed no signs of sabotage. His remaining hand clenched into a fist. By evening, my entire battalion was on edge. Warriors who had faced down charging Centaurian warbeasts were jumping at shadows. The humans weren't just killing us, they were breaking down our psychological defenses, making us doubt our own senses. Zeftar's voice took on the hollow tone of someone reliving a nightmare. That's when Private Kai made his appearance. Young human male, maybe 25 standard years old, brown hair, brown eyes, average height and build completely unremarkable, except for the explosive device strapped to his chest and the absolute calm in his expression. The recruits leaned forward, sensing they were approaching the climax of the story. He came walking down Merchant Street at sunset, hands raised in apparent surrender, calling out in broken Vorthok that he wanted to negotiate. My squad surrounded him immediately. 12 elite warriors with plasma rifles trained on his center mass. Standard prisoner capture formation, perfect tactical positioning. Zeftar's voice began to shake. I demanded his surrender according to Vorthok military protocol. He looked directly at me with those strange human eyes. No fear, no anger, just ... determination. He said something in his own language, something that sounded almost like a prayer. Then he smiled. The old warrior's cybernetic systems began running emergency diagnostic routines as his stress levels redlined. The thermal charge he detonated was crude by our standards, chemical explosives wrapped in metal fragments, but the positioning was perfect. He had calculated blast radius, shrapnel patterns, and cover positions with mathematical precision. In the split second before the explosion, I realized he had been analyzing our formation the entire time we thought we were interrogating him. His voice cracked completely. 12 of my best soldiers vaporized in an instant. I survived only because I was standing behind a reinforced barrier, but the concussion wave threw me 20 meters and shattered my natural carapace in 17 places. As I lay there bleeding, I could hear him laughing, not with madness, but with satisfaction. He had accomplished exactly what he'd set out to do. The cantina was tomb silent as Zeftar's words hung in the recycled air. That was when I understood the terrible truth about humans. They don't just fight to win, they fight to teach lessons. Every death, every sacrifice, every tactical decision is designed to educate their enemies about the price of aggression. Private Kai didn't die to save himself. He died to show us that every human on that planet was a potential weapon. He looked up at the young soldiers, his remaining eye reflecting depths of trauma they couldn't comprehend. And we still had 11.5 million more to find. The artificial lights of forward operating base Alpha dimmed automatically as Hadrian's Edge rotated away from its star, plunging the occupied city into darkness. Zeftar had positioned his command post in what used to be the humans' city hall, a sturdy building with excellent sightlines and multiple escape routes, or so he thought. Night fell like a curtain dropping on a stage. Zeftar continued, his cybernetic eye casting eerie blue light across his scarred features. We had thermal imaging, motion detectors, seismic sensors, atmospheric every piece of surveillance technology the Vorthok military had developed over 3 centuries of conquest. I felt secure behind our electronic walls. He paused, his breathing apparatus cycling with mechanical precision. But humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. Their sun was too harsh, their weather too violent, their predators too numerous. So they learned to hunt in the darkness, to track prey across impossible distances, to never give up once they caught a scent. We thought we were fighting farmers and engineers. We were actually facing the end result of millions of years of evolutionary warfare. The young recruits shifted uncomfortably as Zephyr voice took on an almost hypnotic quality. At 2,200 hours, Sergeant Victor reported strange readings on the perimeter sensors, heat signatures that appeared and vanished, movement patterns that didn't match any known species profile. I ordered a full patrol sweep, 24 warriors in powered armor, equipped with plasma rifles and sensor packages that could detect a mouse breathing from half a kilometer away. His remaining hand traced invisible patterns on the table surface. They found nothing. Empty streets, abandoned buildings, silence so complete it felt like walking through a graveyard. But something was wrong. The air itself felt different, charged with potential energy, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. My warriors reported feeling watched, studied, measured for death. Zephyr cybernetic systems whirred as he accessed deeper memory files. The first sign of real trouble came at 0130 hours. Corporal Zextal was manning observation post Charlie on the 15th floor of what used to be a human office building. Perfect position overlooking 3 major streets, clear fields of fire, reinforced walls. He had been checking in every 15 minutes with clockwork precision. The old warrior's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. When he missed his 0145 check-in, I sent a runner to investigate. They found the observation post exactly as it should be, equipment functioning, no signs of struggle, coffee still warm in Zexil's cup, but Zexil himself was gone, vanished from a sealed room 15 floors above street level with only one entrance. One of the young soldiers interrupted nervously. Teleportation technology. No, Zephyr replied grimly. Something far more practical and infinitely more terrifying. We found him 3 hours later, hanging from the buildings. Communication array like a banner in the wind. The humans had somehow entered his sealed position, neutralized him without triggering any alarms, and transported his body to the roof without being detected by our surveillance grid. His cybernetic eye flickered as traumatic memory files activated. But the real message wasn't his death, it was what they did afterward. They had stripped him of his armor and weapons, then dressed him in civilian human clothing. A business suit, complete with identification badge and briefcase. They turned out warrior into a grotesque parody of their office workers. The recruits exchanged horrified glances as the implications sank in. That's when Lieutenant J made her move. She was a human special forces operative, though we didn't know such things existed at the time. Small woman, maybe 55 kilograms, soaking wet, brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked like she should be teaching children or growing vegetables, not planning military operations. Zephyr's voice took on a tone of grudging respect. Jay led a team of 12 humans through our outer perimeter at exactly 0300 hours. Our sensors never detected them, our patrols never saw them, our automated defenses never activated. They moved through our security net like smoke through a screen, invisible and unstoppable. He gestured to the scars covering his natural carapace. They found Bravo Squad's bunker in Sector 716, elite Vorthok warriors, sleeping in armored suits behind force field barriers. The bunker was designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Its walls were meter-thick, reinforced concrete laced with quantum mesh. The only entrance was through an airlock that required 3 separate authentication codes. The cantina had grown completely silent, other patrons unconsciously holding their breath. When morning came, we found all 16 warriors dead, not killed in combat, executed with surgical precision while they slept. Each one had been neutralized with a single blade thrust to the exact point where their natural carapace joined their artificial armor plating. The kind of anatomical knowledge that takes years of study to acquire. Zephyr's remaining hand began to shake. But Lieutenant J wasn't finished with her lesson. She had arranged the bodies in a perfect circle, each warrior facing outward, as if standing guard. In the center, she left a holographic projector displaying tactical information about every Vorthok unit on the planet. Troop movements, supply schedules, communication codes, command protocols, everything we thought was secret. His voice cracked with remembered terror. The hologram included detailed biological scans of every officer in my battalion, weak points in our armor, vulnerable organs, nervous system mapping, even psychological profiles based on observed behavior patterns. They knew us better than we knew ourselves. The young lieutenant leaned forward, his earlier arrogance completely gone. How did she gather that intelligence? Specialist Hayo answered that question for us, Zefta replied, his cybernetic systems running stress compensation routines. She was the ghost who haunted our command center for 3 days without us ever knowing she was there. He reached into his equipment pouch and withdrew a small metal object, a triangular piece of brushed steel with strange markings etched into its surface. Human military insignia. Hayo left dozens of them throughout our most secure facilities. On my pillow when I woke up, in my private command files, attached to the inside of my armor where only I would find them, each one marked with a different message in perfect Vorthok military script. The recruits stared at the innocuous piece of metal as if it were a venomous serpent. The messages were simple but devastating. Tactical corrections to our defensive positions, suggestions for improved patrol routes, recommendations for better equipment placement. She was critiquing our military performance like an instructor grading academy exercises. Zefta's voice dropped to a whisper filled with awe and terror. But the final message was the one that broke my sanity. I found it etched into the surface of my private comm unit, in lettering so small I needed magnification to read it. We have been watching you since you entered our system. We know your ship locations, your troop numbers, your supply lines, your evacuation protocols. We could have killed you all on the first night, but we wanted you to understand something first. You are not conquerors here, you are students, and class is now in session. The old warrior's cybernetic eye focused on each recruit in turn. That was when I realized the terrifying truth about humans. They hadn't been hiding from us or running away. They had been studying us, learning our weaknesses, planning our destruction with the methodical patience of apex predators. Every move we made, every decision we thought was tactical brilliance, had been anticipated and countered by minds that thought 3 steps ahead of us. He held up the human insignia, its surface gleaming in the cantina's dim light. We came to Hadrian's Edge expecting to fight primitive mammals armed with crude weapons. Instead, we found ourselves trapped on a planet with 12 million professors of warfare, each one eager to teach us lessons we would never forget. His voice carried the weight of absolute defeat, and the final exam was still to come. The emergency klaxons began wailing at 0600 hours on the 7th day. Zefta jerked awake in his command bunker, cybernetic systems instantly analyzing the threat alerts flooding his tactical display. What he saw made his remaining natural limbs go numb with terror. 12 human spacecraft had appeared at the edge of the system, he continued, his voice hollow with remembered defeat. Not warships, cargo haulers, construction vessels, survey craft. They weren't coming to fight, they were coming to clean up. The young recruits leaned forward, confusion replacing their earlier terror. One asked, clean up what? Major Zefta's cybernetic eye dimmed as he accessed the most painful memory files in his neural storage. Us. They were coming to collect the pieces of the greatest military disaster in Vorthok history. His remaining hand traced the scars on his carapace. By that morning, my battalion's strength had dropped from 850 warriors to exactly 3. Myself, Sergeant Kexvar, and communications specialist Desmond. Everyone else was dead, missing, or had suffered complete psychological breakdown. 3 soldiers hiding in a bunker designed for a full regiment. The cantina's recycled air seemed to grow thicker as patrons unconsciously held their breath. The humans had spent 6 days teaching us lessons in warfare that no military academy could have imagined. They showed us how a smaller force could defeat a larger one through superior intelligence, better preparation, and absolute commitment to victory. Every engagement had been a masterclass in tactical thinking. Zefta's voice took on the mechanical precision of a military after-action report. Final casualty assessment: 847 Vorthok ships destroyed or captured, 47 assault battalions eliminated. Total personnel losses: 847,000 warriors, officers, and support staff. Material losses: incalculable. Strategic losses: the myth of Vorthok, invincibility, shattered forever. He paused to let the numbers sink in, but here's what made it truly terrifying. Intercepted human communications revealed that Colonel Bin A, their commanding officer, had classified the entire battle as training exercise Hadrian 7, not a desperate defense of their colony, not a heroic last stand, a training exercise. The young soldiers' mandibles clicked nervously as the implications became clear. They had been using us as test subjects. Every tactical maneuver we made, every weapon we deployed, Every strategy we attempted, all of it was being recorded, analyzed, and catalogued for future reference. We thought we were conquering their world. They thought they were attending the galaxy's most expensive military school. Zeftor's cybernetic limbs whirred as he struggled to stand, the weight of his prosthetics seeming heavier than usual. The evacuation order came through what remained of our communication network. At 1200 hours, Admiral Krextel, what was left of him after his flagship was boarded and captured, transmitted a single message: all units withdraw immediately. This operation is terminated. His voice cracked with bitter laughter. Terminated. 3 days later, as our pathetic remnant of a fleet limped toward the system's edge, we detected massive human reinforcements arriving at Hadrian's Edge. But they weren't warships coming to finish us off. They were scientific vessels, archaeological teams, technical specialists. The old warrior moved slowly toward the cantina's exit, each step a testament to pain that would never fully heal. They came to study the battlefield we'd left behind. Every piece of Vorthok equipment we'd abandoned, every tactical position we'd fortified, every mistake we'd made, all of it became research material for human military scientists. They were already preparing for the next time someone would be stupid enough to attack them. One of the recruits called out desperately, "But Major, surely Command learned from the disaster. Surely they developed countermeasures." Zeftor stopped. At the doorway, his silhouette framed against the corridor lights beyond. Command learned exactly what the humans wanted them to learn. That humans could be defeated through superior numbers and overwhelming firepower. So they began planning larger invasions, bigger fleets, more traditional tactics. They still don't understand what they faced on Hadrian's Edge. His cybernetic eye focused on the young soldiers with laser intensity. What you need to understand is this: humans don't fight to win battles, they fight to win wars. Every engagement, every defeat, every victory, it's all preparation for the next conflict. When they lost their first colony to the Centaurian Empire, they didn't mourn. They studied Centaurian tactics until they could predict every move. When the Crystal Collective destroyed their outer settlements, they analyzed crystalline technology until they could turn it against its creators. The cantina had become a tomb of silence, every patron transfixed by the veteran's words. Humans are the only species in the galaxy that actually becomes stronger when you defeat them. Every loss teaches them something new. Every tactical innovation they encounter gets absorbed into their collective military knowledge. Fight them once, and you face soldiers. Fight them twice, and you face an enemy that knows exactly how you think. Zeftor's final words carried the weight of absolute certainty. They call their homeworld Terra, which means battlefield in their ancient language. Think about that. They named their planet after the concept of warfare. Not paradise, or home, or sanctuary, battlefield. Because that's what it was for millions of years. Every species that ever lived there had to fight every other species for the right to exist. He gestured toward the viewport where distant stars gleamed like predators' eyes. And humans won that fight. They climbed to the top of a food chain that included creatures you couldn't imagine in your worst nightmares. Predators with claws longer than Vorthok arm blades. Hunters with reflexes faster than plasma discharge. Killers with natural armor thicker than our battlesuits. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. They beat them all. Not through superior weapons or advanced technology. Through intelligence, adaptability, and the kind of persistence that borders on insanity. They never gave up. They never accepted defeat. They kept learning, kept adapting, kept fighting, until they owned their entire world. The young lieutenant who had first approached him hours ago now sat slumped in his chair, all arrogance gone. So, when you receive your deployment orders for human space, remember this: you're not facing farmers and engineers. You're facing the end result of 4 billion years of evolutionary warfare. Every human soldier you encounter carries the tactical knowledge of a species that conquered a death world by refusing to die. Zeftor took one final look at the terrified recruits. They'll study you while you fight them. They'll learn from every mistake you make and every advantage you think you have. And when you're dead or broken or running for your lives, they'll collect the pieces and use them to prepare for the next wave of idiots. Stupid enough to underestimate them. The cantina doors hissed shut behind him, leaving the young soldiers alone with their shattered illusions. In the distance, the sound of loading machinery echoed through the station as another supply convoy prepared for departure to human space cargo that would feed the war machine of a species that had turned conflict into an art form. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal creatures. But somewhere among those distant suns, 12 million humans were analyzing the lessons of Hadrian's Edge, preparing for the next chapter in humanity's long education in the art of war. The silence in the cantina stretched on, broken only by the quiet sound of young warriors contemplating their own mortality and the terrible truth about the species they would soon face in battle. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their patient work, collecting data, refining tactics, and preparing for the day when the galaxy would learn that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat. The